COVID didn't affect our progress too much.
Hi, I'm Dr. Elizabeth McCrillis, Director of the Trent Centre for Aging and Society. Soon after the onset of COVID-19, Trent University's Office for Research and Innovation announced a special call for research related to the pandemic. In April of 2020, we at the Centre for Aging were so pleased to announce that 7 of our members were involved in the funded research. As COVID-19 so significantly impacts older people, it's not surprising that almost half of the funded research had an aging studies component. The projects include how culture and gender matter in creating age-friendly cities, volunteerism in rural communities, and addressing social isolation. In this TCAS video series, we are going to profile 3 of those projects that are focusing on aging. The first project, by the Rural Aging Research Team, investigates older volunteerism in an era of global pandemic.
Well, we've been interested in the plight of older people in rural areas at Trent University for quite a while now. One of the things that we do know is that older people are often disadvantaged in terms of their access to services in rural environments and small towns. The other interesting thing we're finding is that most of those services are actually supplemented by volunteering, but in rural areas, most of those volunteers are older people themselves. And that's something that we refer to as older volunteerism, and that's really the focus of this project, is understanding how those people who are volunteering to support their communities and their households and themselves, how they're faring in different environments and different contexts.
So the project, we're conducting interviews with volunteers and administrators from the Selwyn Public Library, the Selwyn Fire Department, and the Abbeyfield House Society of Lakefield. We've worked with these organizations before, so we're really excited to collaborate with them further to really get to this idea of what are the experiences of volunteers and volunteer-based programs in these rural communities in an era of global pandemic. So because of physical and social distancing measures, we'll be conducting the interviews on the phone to really get at this idea of, what's it like to volunteer in a time like this? How has the organization adapted to the changes needed to be put forth to support your volunteers and your community during this time?
So we think this project is really important because it's going to give us all kinds of rural insights in terms of what it means to live through and age during this pandemic. In our project, we're looking at older volunteerism, those people who step up and volunteer and participate in the rural communities to support people who may not have access to services. And through our project, we're going to find out not just how volunteers are faring, but also how programs are actually changing and adapting to better support older volunteers.
So older adults in particular are very susceptible and at risk to COVID-19, and so the impacts of social isolation in particular may be more keenly felt in this time of pandemic by this particular group. Also, this is a group of people who may be more likely to be supported by volunteers to support them in things like housing, transportation, that kind of thing, and those volunteers themselves may be older and themselves at risk, so that support may be there. That might further increase the risk of social isolation, which we know is particularly keenly felt by older adults just in general in rural communities. The dynamics that can underlie this social isolation and the psychological implications of that is particularly important, and that's something we really hope to understand with this project.
So our preliminary findings are showing that there's a really wide range and diversity of experiences felt by both the volunteer-based program and the volunteers during this time. So for the Selwyn Fire Department, they're really carrying on in regular capacity due to the nature of an emergency service in a rural area, but they're changing their policies, including enhanced PPE and putting their training online. But what they are finding is that the number of firefighters attending calls have decreased due to whether age of the volunteers or previous medical condition, just so they're reducing their chance of coming in contact with someone with COVID-19. At Abbeyfield, the steering committee has continued with their regularly scheduled meetings, but we're hosting them virtually. Challenges associated with rural internet connectivity was talked about, so they're now changing to in-person social distancing meetings outside.
We had plans set out to happen in March, and they never did, obviously. So we sat idle, not doing anything for probably most of April and part of May. And we had 3 Zoom meetings, which in my view, were better than the face-to-face.
Unlike the fire department in Abbeyfield that have continued on, business as usual, the Selwyn Public Library has closed their doors since March, recently increasing modified services such as curbside pickup, but have yet to use volunteers. The volunteers are really eager to get back, but have a fear of hesitation on what is it going to look like, what is my role going to be, and how is the library going to support me and the patrons as we return into the library. So relaying findings back to communities is a really integral part of conducting community-based research. So in addition to writing manuscripts for peer-reviewed journals, we'll be writing columns in the local news outlets to share our findings with the community at large. In addition, we'll also be writing small community reports to give back to the organizations and give back to the townships on lessons learned from the project and how these volunteers and volunteer-based programs are coping and how to move forward in a time of global pandemic.